This is a CW Spiral, a podcast run by two Barchies and a Bughead. We're your hosts, Sabrina Reed,
Michael Patterson,
and Reed Gaudens,
bringing you history about the network, the latest news, and in-depth spoiler-filled discussions of some of our favorite shows on the CW. Okay, so there's some interesting news that came out in the week, which is that Barron's has been pulled from the schedule, which is being reported as a cancellation. This is an acquisition, though, so I'm not really sure if that means that the show itself is canceled, or if it just means that if they do have a second season, it will not air on the CW. But first acquisition out the gate to be nixed from the primetime lineup. That is very interesting.
Kind of brutal. I didn't see this coming. I didn't know we were back in the era of if it ain't working, it's not going to be airing. Like that, we haven't been in that situation in like a decade.
Yeah, and this is the network that tends to keep the shows on. Like, we know Riverdale's ratings are not anything to sing about anymore, but like the fact that it wasn't even given a chance beyond its 4 episodes, it's not surprising when you look at the numbers, but it is very surprising in the fact that this is one of the big shows the network wanted to start its new era with. Like, I know its new era doesn't really begin until the fall or the summer schedule kicks off, but these shows kind of paved the way for that. They were the starting point. So the fact that one of them's gone already, Barron's numbers were not very, very good, especially when the Rising looked like it was doing a solid job. We don't know if it'll maintain it, but I think it'll at least get a run at its season. It's still a shock that Barron's wasn't, especially since it's going to be replaced so soon.
And it's being replaced with Nancy. They're doing reruns of Nancy Drew season 4 in the 9 p.m. slot on Mondays starting June 26th, which, I mean, double dose of Nancy for people, that's exciting, but also this has had the fandom be like, so you canceled us, but you're going to use us for fill-in for the schedule.
I mean, it's a fair question.
And it pairs better with the Rising.
Very much so.
I'm just going to say that.
Yeah. It was kind of an unusual disconnect between those two programs, Barron's and the Rising. But yeah, it's kind of cool for Nancy. Like, Nancy's made quite a comeback in the ratings department, like doing nearly twice of what she was doing at one point. So the fact is that it'll be interesting to see how a rerun of the show does in Barron's slot. I hate to say it, but like, the bar is quite low. All it needs to do is do better than Barron's, and some of those recent episodes of Barron's weren't doing that well. So yay, Nancy, more exposure for Nancy. I hope it does well, and I hope the rerun does well as well.
Going out on top. But also, before we get any ideas, let me just reiterate Green Table Talk last week. Go rewatch that before the Monday ratings hit. Because what we're not going to do is what we talked about last week.
Yes, that's for sure. But it is good fuel for the hashtag Nancy the movie, hashtag Nace the movie campaign.
Mm-hmm. Start the movement.
Yes, do that. I do wonder, though, with Barron's being pulled, what that means for like the schedule moving forward, because the summer shows land in July. So does this mean if they're not doing well, we're just going to start pulling shows off air and putting on reruns of shows that have either finished their runs, like we series finale, we're done, but we're going to put you on for the summer? And if that's the case, then the fall schedule, a little shaky, a little scary.
Yeah, I thought about that too. Yeah. Fall could be a minefield. But that's funny you say that, re-airing shows. Like, I feel like in the summer, like back in the day, they used to just re-air most of their like hit shows, and you'd get like a sprinkle of like some fun reality TV. But now it's like everybody wants every time slot filled with new content. And I'm like, we could be re-airing All American Homecoming, which could use like a second exposure linearly, not just on Netflix. Like, you could use, even if no one watches it, it still gives people another chance who aren't Netflix subscribers to watch All American Homecoming. Like, I mean, you have shows that you're going to air again. I feel like they overstuffed it. I'm going to say it. I don't think we've said that before. I think they acquired too much.
Yeah, it was a free-for-all. They were like, what was the thing they kept saying? We're open for business. Mm-hmm. And like, so
it's way too open.
Yeah.
They were like, should we order this? Yes. How many shows? Yes.
And there's no consistency in the programming. We did say that before. Like, if you saw another teen drama, you go, I can get into this. If you saw another superhero drama, you'd go, I can get into this. Every single one of these acquisitions feels completely out of left field, like they're starting from scratch. And when you're doing that with every kind of brand, every kind of show you're kicking off, the schedule itself, you set yourself up for that same failure over and over and over again. And yes, there will be varying degrees of it. I think we can call the Rising a success since its numbers were at least on par with Nancy. Nancy maintained it, the Rising did not, but its numbers are on par with Nancy. Gotham Knights, solid success for an acquisition they didn't have to spend that much money on. But Barons, ain't nobody was watching that. So unfortunately, that feels like that has to be written off as a failure. I wonder if I know they say believe that the rest of the episodes will be available to stream on CW TV, but I don't know whether they still have to fulfill the obligation of airing them on TV. But if this does start a trend going forward with some of the other shows, it's going to be a bit of a problem. I think they can maybe get away with it over the summer. Not so sure about once the fall begins.
I know. And well, CBS is doing talk about old school. They are actually airing their seasons all the way through on the summer. I believe So Help Me Todd started over again. Our Country is airing as well.
The strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the optics of pulling a show for 4 episodes. It's like, who wants to invest their time in a show that will be pooled when this network had a reputation for airing a full episode count, regardless of ratings? Like, they did away with pulling shows, I want to say. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were just airing them.
Yeah, they never really pulled them again after, like, there were a few, like, in the early days, but, like, recently you knew, like, if it started airing, you were gonna follow through with it. But now it's like, who's gonna want to start a show when it can be pulled and you don't know where to find it? I don't know.
Yeah, because even when they pulled Killer Camp, what they did was they pulled it because they felt like they made a mistake airing it in the fall, I believe is when they had it. So they moved it back to the summer, and it aired all the way through on the summer. And like people, I think, knew that it was going to be coming back. But now it's like, is Barron's coming at all? Is Barron's back again? It's like, probably not. But I mean, more power to the schedule. If the schedule stays around, if there's a wish I have, or if something's gonna be slotted in, if they pull more shows, I want them to air the Flash season 1 all the way through.
I think that'd be a good idea. And we've seen with Stargirl, we've seen with Superman and Lois, these reruns do quite decent numbers. And if they have the rights to them to re-air them again, I think if they could maybe generate half the audience of what a current Flash episode was doing, that would be a huge success because it would still be higher than Barron's. Sorry, I'm going to stop dragging Barron's. It's not its fault. But like, you know what I mean? I just feel like it's such an unusual time, and their era isn't off to the strongest of start. We've seen those reports about the Live Golf numbers not being strong. Now we have a show like this feels like an admittance that this wasn't what they wanted, so they're moving it. And the irony, the imagery, and the fact that they're replacing it with an actual CW original, a show that they themselves cancelled before that final season even began. The irony is not lost on any of us. Are they going to have to go back to that traditional CW back catalogue to help them out of a few problems if they keep running into these kinds of problems going forward?
It's a question. Though, before we move on, I do want to reiterate what Reed said. This does not mean the Save the Show campaign. This should fire back up. Do let it rest. Move forward. But moving into Superman and Lois, it's the penultimate episode. I wanted to get a temperature check on our thoughts for Lex, this iteration of Lex in it's not the Arrowverse, the Arrowverse adjacent series.
Well, I have to say, Lex Luthor is known for his larger-than-life presence, and Michael Cudlitz definitely brought that. You felt the gravity of Lex. Over the years, we've seen many variations of Lex Luthor. There's a campy element. There's whatever that version Jesse Eisenberg was doing in the DCEO. And then, of course, there's the larger-than-life, not to be trifled with kind of Lex Luthor. Michael Cudlitz is definitely going to be that version of Lex, and I feel like that came across really well. It was an unusual episode of an introduction, and I'm sure we'll get into all of that, but I would like to say that I felt every bit of the gravity they've built up as far as Lex Luthor goes. They've mentioned his name here, there. They've mentioned that he was in prison. They've mentioned that he's the devil. I feel like we saw all of that in this episode, and that definitely came across for me.
Now, I've only seen one version of Lex Luthor in my entire life. This was like the polar opposite. Not what I was expecting. I don't know if that's good or bad. Still, figuring that out. So I guess indifferent. currently. Sabrina, how about you?
I liked him. I think, I mean, my issues with the story aside, I thought that Michael Cudlitz's performance, he does give a lot of gravitas to the role.
Mhm.
It is very mobster, which is good because we're coming off of Bruno, who also was very mobster businessman, like dynamic expression in the show. So I just felt like I didn't need the long walk from him, but I also watching the whole episode, I was like, I feel like this would be controversial, but if he had just had his own episode, if we had a higher episode count, Lex probably would have had an episode to himself with potentially flashbacks of the time when Lois put him in jail with her reporting. It just felt like it was pieced together because they didn't get the episode count they wanted. Like if we had like 15 episodes, he might have gotten a standalone. I think the story would have been helped from that. But I did appreciate that he plays the long game, and that was showed in the storyline that he had. I mean, the brutal beating he took because he knew he's like, I don't need to actually have power over you by being aggressive towards you myself. I need to get into the office with the warden because he's the one who has true power. And when that was revealed, because I was like, I know he's not just letting himself get clocked like this just because, like, there has to be a reason. And when they revealed the reason, I was like, oh, those inmates' lives are going to be wrecked. And that was exactly what happened because I was trying to figure out, because I think in the first few minutes, you see inmates standing outside of their cells. And I was like, why are they standing like butlers? What is this? What type of universe? Why is this being allowed? And I thought the man who dropped the note on his desk telling him that he was free, I thought that was somehow his body man or like one of his people. And I was like, when it was the warden, I was like, oh, the warden is acting like he's the butler. This is weird and kind of cool. Where are we going with this? It kind of fizzled after that, but I did enjoy the building up of that story.
And I agree with you when the warden dropped that and then he said yes sir, I was like, why is the warden saying yes sir, and why is the warden being so polite to him, like almost in a fearful kind of way. But we saw the same thing on Supergirl when Lex Luthor gets into prison. He controls things from the inside out, and I thought that was a very effective introduction of him, because the thing about Lex is he doesn't usually use his brawn to manipulate people. He uses his brain, and that's definitely what we saw here. Of course, I do think this Lex Luthor is very well built and could use his brawn if he wanted to. But I think the dangerous thing about Lex is, like you said, he plays the long game. The pieces are always working in his mind. The cogs are always turning, and that's what he did. He ultimately got what he wanted. When he had the warden ring his own home and find out that his family was in danger, such a Lex Luthor thing to do. He's such an intimidating screen presence right from the off, and I really like that. I did have a little giggle to myself because I remember when we first brought up Lex and the walk on the highway, you said, Reed, oh, that'll be the last shot of season 3 and he'll never make it to Smallville. And I was like, well, we're lucky. That? Yeah, I was like, well, we're kind of lucky. We're kind of lucky that wasn't, because he almost didn't make it to Smallville because it took the whole episode. But I mean, he got there in the end. I kind of did see the fact that he was showing up outside Clark and Lois's house coming, because that was not the highway to Metropolis. That looked like the highway that Clark revealed himself to Lana.
It looked like the highway that Dean Winchester was in the opening shot or the ending shot of the Winchesters. I was like, this is giving me Supernatural. Why?
Vancouver, they all look the same. But yeah, totally. I kind of saw the fact that he would show up there outside their house coming. The scene was worth the wait. The screaming on the porch might have been a choice, but I think it definitely got the idea that Lex was desperate at this point. He was kind of broken by his time inside, but I did love the fact that Lois wasn't afraid to stand up to him, and it was like, wait, I might have got it wrong, but you deserve to be in prison. So I feel like that's going to be the tug of war. He thinks he's an innocent man because he went down for the wrong crime, but everybody else knows he's guilty of something, and he served the time he should have served. So I think that'll come into the finale, play into the finale really, really well. I'm excited to see where it kind of goes, because we know he's going to be a big presence next season. So how's he going to factor into the finale and still manage to stick around after that? Some interesting questions there, but I thought it was a solid introduction to him, even if some of the rest of the episode let it down.
Can I ask a question about the prison that holds zero importance?
Go for it.
It was called Strikers, right?
Yeah.
Is that like a thing in the Superman universe?
I believe it is a prison in the comics. I'm cutting this if I'm wrong. I believe it is a prison in the comics. Someone's mentioned Stryker's Island and something I've watched before, but I can't remember what it is.
Is that a play on Rikers?
It might be. You might be right.
Because it was giving me like Riverdale when when Veronica calls it like the Glamberger egg or whatever, and they talk about Bailey's Comet. And it was like, it kind of like, I was like, whoa, they don't really do this kind of thing in this show. It was kind of a weird moment of like comic camp. And I was like, oh, it took me aback, and it kind of made me giggle. Okay, continue.
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Sometimes you will see little things like that, like the '60s Batman. Instead of going to London, they went to Londinium, and instead of getting help from Scotland Yard, they got help from Ireland Yard. Classic little '60s nods to the comics. I guess that's what it is, but I am pretty sure that Strikers was not a creation of Superman and Lois. It was already existed in the comics before that.
I feel like the show doesn't usually do stuff like that because it feels so, at least to me, it feels so like centered in like reality. It's not really like comic-y.
Yeah.
At least to me. I'm gonna keep reiterating, at least to me.
You're not wrong. No, you're not wrong. This is the most realistic version of Superman we ever had.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, I'm validated.
One thing I do want to touch on with Lex, which I think is actually a through line that's throughout this season, potentially in the entirety of Superman and Lois, is the importance of parenthood. Because his large grievance is that he missed his daughter's coming of age. His 20 years in prison. She's a grown person at this point. And I remember kept thinking, I was like, we've been dealing a lot with parents in this show and how they feel about raising their kids and how hard it is to be a parent and trying to navigate that road. I assume since they showed us a picture of her and he wasn't just screaming on the porch just cause, that we will see an adult version of her, if not in the finale, then in season 4. And so that'll be interesting. I can't help but think about the snap in Marvel, like, and how that changed parent child relationships because of the 5-year gap. And so I always find that fascinating when, you know, you're dealing with a parent who lost time and what that looks like and how the child, the adult child at this point, adjusts to having them back. I think he said that she won't speak to him. Correct. And he had a murder charge, correct? So
yes.
I do wonder if like we will see her getting to be a father again because he was innocent, which is interesting to me because I'm like, are you mad that it was a murder charge and you personally haven't gone as far as murder, even though you had people killed? Or are you mad because you were innocent of the crime, period? Like, I just wonder, like, I know it took 20 years of his life. I'm also wondering if he would have dealt better with it if he had contact with his daughter.
And I thought that as well. It's the same kind of thing with Bruno, who was a completely one-dimensional villain in the comics. Lex is obviously far more interesting in the comics, but he's like a mastermind who's out to serve his own needs. He wants to be considered the man of tomorrow. He doesn't like that Superman gets all this attention. Yet here we have a man angry at the fact that he missed out on his daughter's life and that she's made an assumption about him that wasn't true. Even though, let's be honest, the assumption was true. We know Lex has had people killed. We know he's a bad person. He just happened to get the wrong thing pinned on him. And this whole season's raised an interesting question because Lois and Clark are paragons of integrity. They knew it was probably Lex was where he deserved to be, but they got him released because they caught him for the wrong thing. Whereas a lot of other people would probably keep him locked up because it would be right to keep him off the streets. So I feel like that's going to weigh on them as well. The fact that his daughter won't talk to him now might weigh on them as well because he was accused of something he didn't do. It's definitely going a long way in making this like one-liner manipulative kind of spewing villain a lot more well-rounded, and I feel like we will see that more. I remember saying last week when we talked about the cast cuts, okay, we have the 4 counts, but Lex isn't going to be involved in the family dynamic. What's Lex going to do for 10 episodes? Well, now we have a potential storyline for Lex. We probably won't see the daughter next week because next week it'll be all about getting revenge in the finale at whatever Bizarro's up to. And that'll be all about that. But I feel like when we come back, time will have passed, we'll have settled down, and we will see maybe Lex trying to reconnect with his daughter, which again, just like it did with Bruno, would hopefully add a lot more depth to him.
How old would this daughter be?
Did he say she was 14 when he was imprisoned, which 20 years ago, which would suggest she's 34 now, I think.
I'm not gonna lie to you. I've been dreamcasting this whole time you guys have been talking.
Ooh, do you have?
Give us ideas.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to like be confined to age, but I was like, how funny and like full circle would it be if it was like Kristen Kruk?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
That would be
yeah,
awesome.
that would be
Like,
so great.
but I'm like, I don't know what the budget is for any guest roles. So I'm
Mhm.
like,
Mm.
can they afford a former Miss Lana Lang? I don't know, but that'd be fun. That's all I got right now.
Yeah, that
But
would be amazing. And the Superman mythology is known for casting people like Erica
yeah.
Durance, who played Lois on Smallville, of course, showed up as Kara's second mom on Supergirl. Helen Slater, who played Supergirl in the movie, played Kara's adoptive mom on Supergirl. So the Superman mythology knows how to cast like legacy actors and bring them in. So I think that would be really cool. I do feel
Or
like
even who played Supergirl in Smallville?
oh
The blonde one.
Laura Vandervoort, yes,
There's
her.
another one. I'm
Yes,
like,
that's a good one.
who's in Smallville that we could put in here in season 4?
I take any of it, but again, if it's a one episode role, they'll probably be able to get them recurring. Who knows? I hate that we even have to have this conversation. I wouldn't be surprised if they pulled a twist and it ended up being someone like Leslie Lar, remember, who was Morgan Edge's right hand woman, because she was a
Mm.
redhead, and of course Lex's child would have to be a redhead. Um, so
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised if they did that. But then she was
I didn't know we had hair color.
I think the daughter had red hair on the photo, and
She
Lex is
did.
naturally red, naturally a redhead.
She dyed her hair to separate herself from her family.
To free herself from that life. I love that we've just storyline season 4 here, and suddenly all a lot more excited about it. But yeah, like I said, I just think that's far more interesting. We definitely have a Lex that's physically dangerous and mentally dangerous, but let's humanize him a little bit. I think that's all. Reed, the Lex you're familiar with is the most human Lex we've ever had. The one on Smallville is by far the most human version of the character. And don't get me wrong, I love a campy Lex who likes to shoot missiles at space and whatever for no reason whatsoever and have the time of his life doing it. But this show likes to give people storylines, likes to give people depth, and likes to give them something outside of shooting missiles and using kryptonite. So hopefully we'll see that. Yeah, and talking about it, I'm actually even more excited than I was. The episode wasn't perfect, but it was a solid introduction to the character, and I can't wait to see where he goes with it.
I'm intrigued though by the vendetta storyline, because if this was anybody else, if it was like Lois Lane got it wrong, horribly wrong, someone lost their, lost a significant portion of their life and time with the people that they love, his demand that she retire would have weight. It would carry water. Like people would be like, she didn't rush anything. It's not her fault. Like, how was she supposed to know that there was a meta out there that could change their voice and pretend that they were Lex Luthor in order to have her be able to build a story that would put him behind jail? Like that's like a very like intricate, complicated, complex type of thing to have to navigate. But I did really enjoy, besides the screen, I did really enjoy the porch scene, because Lois does take responsibility for something that was basically out of her control, but she did realize that, he did lose time. And she says, I'm sorry. Like, she apologizes, I think twice, but that's all he's getting out of her, because she's also like, you were a bad, bad man. I'm not dropping my career because I was wrong about this thing, even though it did take time from you. I think that is a interesting story point for everybody involved, because I think you're right, Michael, that there's going to be guilt there. Not guilt over, putting a bad man behind bars, but guilt over getting it wrong and how that can affect people, and that his daughter lost time with her father. Like, I think that is something that could eat away at Lois. But Lois is also going to be like, I said what I said about the apology, and now I'm done with it, and don't threaten me. And Clark, I love Clark stood in front of her, and of course, Lex doesn't care, but he's suddenly like, you need to leave. Now it's like, yes. Yeah.
Right.
Because as Reed is always saying, like, Clark's a very solid dude. We don't know why they don't treat him like he's a solid man, but he is. And not that Lex was intimidated, but Lex did not step any closer. So I appreciated that too.
I noticed the same thing. I was going to say, wait, nobody takes Clark seriously, but suddenly Lex might be. Because at first he was like, shut your mouth when Clark stepped up, but then Clark stepped forward and roared and got like a little bit more serious, such a stern look on his face. And Lex kind of had that moment where he was almost like looking through the glasses, like, I've seen that kind of look before. obviously from Superman. Obviously, he didn't make the connection. But then, I mean, like, fair play. Of all the people to take Clark seriously, it was Lex Luthor of all people. Kyle, he'll rage into a war for no reason whatsoever, but Lex took him seriously. But I love that scene because everybody was traditionally who they're supposed to be. Lex was angry, as Lex likes to be, and we've seen Bitsy play multiple versions of Lois. She's been a loving wife, a determined reporter, a great mother, but here we got to see her be the traditional Lois Lane, where at first she took responsibility for her actions, but then she was like, do you know what? I've had enough of this. You deserve to be behind bars, and walked forward. Icon, love that moment, and Clark is protective as always. That was probably my favorite scene from the episode because, like we said, this episode could be infuriating at times, but that scene wasn't one of them.
More to that point, can we keep talking about Clark? I think you know where I'm veering into here with a certain teenager.
Yes.
Yep.
Clark was tried today. Well, not today, but in that episode. And it was like, did not deserve the energy that he got whatsoever at any point in the episode. Like,
I thought I made myself clear when Kyle tried it. Like, what? And now Jordan's putting his hands on his dad. What is happening?
I don't know.
Unacceptable.
The instant regret in Jordan's face. And I'm like, yeah, maybe you should have thought about that 4 seconds ago.
Yeah.
Oh, the hurt on Clark's face too. Like I think he's snatching his arm away, but he does it by using his powers, and that was like so much. I was like, why would you buckle your father? First, that's Clark. He loves you. He adores you. He just wants you to like not get a big head. Second, he's Superman. What do you think you're doing?
People forget this, and I'm like, what's not clicking? I'm gonna say something that I just thought of and remembered that I don't think anybody's gonna like. So let's all just like go into this knowing that. But I didn't like what Sam said after. And I know Sam has fans and shooters, but can we all just stay with me here? It's not that big of a deal. But he said you need to rein him in. And I'm like, not the thing to say in the moment, not wrong, but it reminds me of something he said earlier in the season in the episode when Lois was not, she was trying to get out of her treatments. And he said to Clark, like, something to the fact that he was putting the responsibility on Clark to get Lois to do her treatments. And I'm like, I don't like this part of Sam. I don't like the way that they make it, like, yes, Jordan is Clark's son. Yes, he has some responsibility to parent him and make sure he doesn't do those things, but Clark can't control the people around him, even if he is Superman. I'm like, it just bugs me when Sam does that stuff, because maybe I am just too protective of Clark. So I'm like, can you just chill, father-in-law?
It's very traditional, and Clark is not like a traditional father. I feel like Sam is very hands-on in the sense that it comes off really gruff. It's which is why, like, I had actually a problem with Clark's line about "this is my house." Like, if you want to live here, you live by my rules. It's like that feels out of character for Clark to say. But I was trying to like give reason for the line, and I was like, is it because he just feels completely out of control? Because Jordan is not listening. And Jordan's been so rude. It was so rude in that kitchen scene. But I was like, that felt like something Sam would say. And like Clark's usually like, I want to, give them a chance to get through their feelings. Like, I want to be respected, but like, I also want to work through and see their perspective, but also, you need to bring it back. I think he's having such a hard time with Jordan though, because Jordan, a lot like most of the teens on the show, which kind of makes sense, but I think he's a very extreme version of it, is it's his way or the highway, and he feels like his parents are treating him that way. And it's like, no, you have no idea what it's like to have the exposure that Clark does as Superman. He is trying to save you, especially as someone like, they also know about his personality. Like, it's great when you're getting the praise. The one thing the show doesn't often show is how much pushback there is about Superman. Like, because I think they like to do the whole truth and hope and being there for everybody and being a global superhero. But I wonder if we're going to start getting into that portion that they don't talk about on the show that much, which is that there are actual people that do not care for Superman and want to regulate him and feel like he should not be given as much leeway as he is. And I was like, Jordan, you've never had to handle that, and you're a teenager. Like, he's a grown man navigating it. You are 16 years old. Like, the American government could decide to go. Like, the only thing keeping them from doing that is that his grandfather is in the DoD, the head of DoD.
Mm-hmm. And you know who really likes to regulate Superman? Lex Luthor. And we now have an evil Superman on the loose out there. So this is actually quite an interesting time for the storyline to come up. Could Lex go after Jordan when he knows there's another superhero out there? Jordan is completely reckless. We've known that since season 1. It is getting way out of hand. I do agree, Reed, about what Sam said, that he seems to descend into that. He can be such a cuddly grandfather when he wants to be, but he seems to descend into that soldier-like mentality, and that you need to get control of the situation, and he blames it all on Clark. And let's be honest, Sam has quite a good relationship with Jordan. Maybe he's the one who could get through to him. I just feel like, yes, I understand why the attention was on Clark, because he's the super person who can control the other super person, but he's struggling now and they're hitting the wall. Maybe Sam's the right person to do that. I don't know. But yeah, it was strange having to see Clark push to that point, because Jordan kept pushing in that episode. I don't really love how that all came up with the whole the Jordan and Sarah thing. Sarah came off as quite petty, even though she had a point and whatever. I feel like they're really struggling with the portrayal of those two characters. And so when both of them are at loggerheads over something like that, you're like, okay, but whose side am I on? And honestly, the answer is none at this point. Honestly. And then they get Lana and Lois involved to make you choose a side. And you're like, well, I'm not choosing between the two of them. So it's really, I don't know where they're going with it. No, that's wrong. I do know where they're going with it. I don't know why it needed to go in this direction, because it was a very frustrating episode. I mean, on the Jordan end, it worked like a dream because we were supposed to be frustrated with them. But it kind of escalated overnight. Like, we think, of course, people knew he existed because that reporter, I mentioned to you guys the other day about how that reporter that Lois worked with in Metropolis might pop up more in season 4. And there she was, Janet, running the story about Jordan. So we know the attention's on Jordan. But he made that situation a heck of a lot worse. The tornado scene, incredible. But then he landed and started posing with people for photos. Not even Superman does that. We don't need to be at that. And it just feels like Jordan's learned nothing at this point. We're running out of time to make him learn the lesson before the end of the season. Will he, or will part of the fallout be what season 4 is all about?
I was kind of scared that Sarah was gonna tweet out his secret, because she said at the end of that scene with Lana, she was like, if he doesn't care about a secret, why should I? And she pulled up her phone. I was like, are you about to tweet it? But I forgot she's just a teenage girl, and when you're a teenager, you just pull up your phone and you're like, I'm gonna go on TikTok. I don't want to talk about this anymore.
I was scared too, because the energy in the lines that they had for her very much seemed like she was just going to say it. And she's like, fine, you don't care, then I don't care. So the next time someone asks me about it, I'm just gonna be like, it's Jordan. Lives down the way in the farmhouse. She was giving a lot of that. I was there for her perspective in terms of the stress of lying, especially because her lie was terrible. It really was the worst lie to be like, I don't know, we ended up on the street.
No effort was made in that lie. I'm sorry.
So I get being stressed about that part of it. But the other side is just she's had what, a month, 2 months with it. Imagine being the person who has to hold on to that for life. I think that's probably what she's starting to understand, how much that could just ruin your relationships with people. And I do get that it would affect her life in the sense that if his name did get out, that she dated Jordan. So then everyone's going to be like, when did you know? How did you know? And she could be put in danger, which is not what she's talking about. Those are not her talking points. But if I were to be fair and give her talking points, that's what I would be seeing what she's concerned about. I don't want to be at the center of the storm with you, but I'm going to be dragged into the center of the storm with you if you're not careful. Because if people put 2 and 2 together, they're also going to know that I'm associated with you and that my family's associated with you. And then how are we going to navigate Smallville?
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the problem with Sarah. She does have a point. She really does have a point. But because she's kind of clashed with everyone leading up to this moment, I did do a deep dive on the internet to see what the fans were thinking. And people found it very hard to relate to her, understand what she was feeling because of the way she came across as like you said, she kind of gave the impression of, you know what, I'm going to tell everybody. And she's kind of had that before. It feels like the gravity of certain situations don't weigh on her. And that now that this one is, it just felt like she was acting the same. I don't know. I had a tough time with this show does such seamless writing that you kind of can't see the writer's work at hand. Completely felt like I saw it play out and knew exactly how it was going to go this week. And I thought that kind of let it down.
But that scene with Lana and Sarah, I was like so disconnected to it because Lana was asking, she seemed more like surprised and I don't want to say outraged, whatever that emotion was she was feeling. Sarah wasn't matching it. It just felt like they were on two different, which is like understandable. But I was like, it feels like they're not communicating the same situation. There's a disconnect for me in that moment. And I'm like, I don't know. Who am I? What? I had nothing to grasp in that scene besides like, oh, was she tweeting it? That was all I really got from it.
I think it was like paradoxical because I feel like Sarah was giving somehow both anger and nonchalance. And like Lana was like, wait, what? He's doing what? And so we just go and talk to his parents, which again, the anger over even like, why did you say something to Lois and Clark? Like, because their son is out here about to expose the secret. What is she supposed to do? Just sit on it? Like he's running around town, like not being careful. I did love in the tornado, like Clark is just yelling at him. He's like, I don't need your help. What?
He just let his flew on and left him there.
Like, cause it's so transparent. And I did love Sarah's takedown of Jordan, you know, when he was talking about like, I was just saying that it was a good job because they were picking on Jordan, like, picking on Junior. She's like, you don't like Junior. That was not about defending Junior. It was about you getting recognition in some way. And he's like, why can't I just have recognition? It's like, because you can't. It's like, I know, you know, it's rude to be like the wrong brother got powers, but I feel like a lot of the internet and potentially even Clark in this episode was like, I think one of my children should have gotten powers over the other because this is just a mess. Because John spends the whole episode just wanting to be able to help people and be a part of a community for in his own way and not having Clark's legacy like weighing on him. And can we get into Kyle real quick? Because Kyle, once again, I'm not even stressed, I'm just angry. Like he just angers me so much. He angered me in the episode before, he's angering me now. I mainly because how dare he tell a child that they can't talk to their parent about what's going on at work? He's 16 years old. He's volunteered here.
Nasty behavior.
It is. And that was like, did he outright and say it? No, but it was very much heavily implied. And I hated that conversation because he made it seem like it was wrong and in-house, like firehouse conversations should stay in the firehouse. Like, first of all, it wasn't a conversation. It was an entire switch up of behavior. Second of all, you're a grown person. And I know you'd fly off the handle if anyone told Sarah or your daughter, whose name is escaping me, that they can't talk to you.
Wait, what is the baby's name?
Sophie, isn't it?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, there we go. If someone
Justice for Sophie still, don't forget it.
You know what? Did anyone ask where that baby was during the tornado?
Nope.
No one cared.
Lana was working, Kyle was at the firehouse, Sarah was at the cafe. No one worried about Sophie.
Sarah does not care about her sister.
No.
It's true, and so sad. But like that, just Kyle did switch up, and Kyle's anger. It's funny that he was like, you know, we need to handle our anger one-on-one. Like if you're bothered by something that's happening in the firehouse, you need to come directly to me so we can hash it out. I was like, the hypocrisy. You're actually bothered that Clark came to you to tell you about your behavior politely and asked you to treat his son like a normal person and not like Superman's son, and that he didn't come to ask you for help. But you're not addressing that with Clark. You're addressing that with his son.
Kyle really frustrated me in this episode because that first scene when he stood up for Jonathan, I was like, yes, Kyle, absolutely. Tell that other rude man how it is. That's great. Perfect. But then you find out he was doing it for the wrong reasons, and that if he hadn't found out Clark was Superman, he still would have been that arrogant boss who made Jonathan have to fight for that t-shirt with his name on it. And the only reason he treated him differently was that his dad was Superman. didn't like that. And then he pivoted in the completely opposite direction. It was like, oh, you can talk to me about anything. I think the whole point was that it was supposed to be, you can come to me man to man and I'll see you for who you are, not a Superman son. Did not come off like that in the slightest. Like you said, it came off as though he was telling him that if you have a problem, take it up with me, but not in so many words. That's definitely a Kyle thing to do, and a very regressive Kyle thing to do, because I thought he'd moved past that kind of like, I'm the big man kind of version of himself. Apparently not. We're running out of time because we don't know how much we'll see of him next season. But like, yeah, he was only in like two major scenes in the episode, and incredibly infuriating in both of them.
Mm, they both were terrible. To your point about the man who was like getting angry, I was like, there is a learning thing here that John should pay attention to orders and make sure he checks the bags, but aggressively telling him that he needs to go back and get your orders. Can't we just both go to the thing together? Or tell him, you messed up my order. Can I get my burger? Because everyone's eating, but I don't have food.
Exactly.
And John did want to go back and get it. Even with him being spoken to that way, he did want to go like, oh, I messed that up. Let me just go back. And Kyle was like, no, he'll be fine. And I was like, well, he doesn't have his food. He doesn't have lunch. He's being really rude, but he doesn't have his order. I know Jonathan said later in the episode, I think to Jordan, that he just wants to belong and he just wants to be able to fit in there and hang out with these guys. And I was like, they haven't said a kind thing yet to you. We haven't had any bonding moments. I'd find another fire station.
I would just quit if I was him. It's not worth it.
It's not. Can we find other ways to like volunteer? Is there a local shelter? Is there is there a small version of a Goodwill? Like, can we go? We can help people in other ways. Volunteer at the hospital.
Why has no one opened the Talon yet? I'm waiting, Michael. You know I am. Like, I'm waiting for these teens to start a business, like a self-respecting CW show. Why are these teens running a business?
I'm telling you, season 4 will start with Sarah. I've changed Vicky May's name to the Talon, and she'll be running it.
Gorgeous. I love it.
There's something to do besides what she's been doing.
Yeah.
It's gonna be like
that's her purpose.
Kim Kardashian scene, like, if you don't run a business, you don't know what it's like running a business. She's gonna be screaming this to her mom. I know that.
No, it'll be like, I'm running the whole time.
Oh goodness! What was Lana talking about shipping delays? Were we just being a mayor, or do you think this is going to come back into the storyline at some point?
Yeah, this is bothering me. They haven't given Lana any mayoral stuff to do, so the best we get is that she's stressed on the phone and hangs up right before she has a conversation with Sarah. Probably won't come back in again. I would like to see her doing something with the town, since they had her. Actually, they repaired it pretty quickly after Superman and that man destroyed it in that fight a few weeks ago. But I just like to see. I fear we're running out of time with Lana. I want to spend more time with her being the mayor.
It's sad. I feel like this episode also gave a lot of people who were like, yes to the cuts, so much vindication. I was like, no, I'm not team all 7 people should go. I just want everyone to have stronger storylines. And if they can do that in recurring or guest roles, I'd really appreciate that. But this episode, I felt like, did y'all care about anybody but Clark, Lois, and Lex? Because everybody else was struggling.
It's tiring.
Yeah.
It's really been tiring this season with the up and down with everybody else.
And this was an episode that focused only on the ensemble cast, and yet we were still missing John Henry, Natalie, and Chrissy. Chrissy not so much, but John Henry and Natalie.
I didn't even notice she was gone.
And
no shade.
They threw a line in that she was sick. It's not that I wouldn't miss Chrissy. The point is, I'm saying John Henry and Natalie are usually two of the characters that actually have their heads screwed on, and you like to see them do things, because more often than not, unless it involves each other, they're quite logical characters. So we did miss them, and we were left with the illogical people, and there was a lot of illogical thinking in that episode. I do agree. I think a character like Sarah and maybe Chrissy could benefit from guest roles or recurring roles, because then they wouldn't have to find a way to shoehorn conflict for them in every single episode. Heck, I think Jordan could benefit from a recurring role at this point, but like, you know what I mean? I just feel like...
Wait, who'd you say?
Jordan could benefit from a recurring role at this point, because again, they wouldn't have to shoehorn conflict in for him every episode. Give him the one conflict and let it play out over his 5 episodes or however many he's allotted. But yeah, I was excited to spend time with the cast outside of Clark and Lois, and this episode left me want to spend more time with Clark and Lois.
For sure. And we got another one of those like Lois openings where we're going through the aftermath of the mastectomy and her saying, when you change, she had a bodily change, you have to step into it. She decided that she was going to move forward and she was going to be who she is, and she was going to accept who she is physically. And I guess, the trauma of going through cancer treatment, but embrace who she is as well. And I like that scene. But then it was done. I feel like that was perhaps the closure of the cancer storyline. Like, we're done now. It just felt like they were like, it seemed final when she buttoned up that shirt. She looked herself in the mirror, had that final voiceover, and we might be closing that chapter. And that's, of course, they talk about reconstructive surgery, because I know that was a talking point in one of the episodes. But they might just do that with a throwaway line in season 4.
Didn't Lois said, Lex, my doctors have a positive outlook or something like that. They've been feeding in little lines like that to let us know that, okay, I think we're ready to move into the next chapter. Maybe she'll get an official, like, kind of like all clear at the end of the season 3, just so that we can know they've left that storyline in the past and they're ready to move on from it. But I agree, it's definitely taken a back seat recently, and I know it's nice to see them move on through their lives, but considering it was handling the storyline so well, I do hope that there is some kind of closure to it and we don't just move straight into Lex being the big villain like any other Superman story.
You know what I really liked? I really liked Lex's rock music motif. I enjoyed that.
Yes.
I like
that was so good. Every time. I was just,
I loved it over the opening. Like, I love what they've done with music this season, because it wasn't over the title card. It wasn't the same score. It's been different depending on the vibe of the episode. But I really enjoyed it this episode. It was a good motif.
And it definitely paved the way for his arrival, because he's there to make some noise.
Yeah.
Cannot wait to see what he gets up to in the finale, since we have Bizarro finally back. He's been here all season, and they have really only been showing him to us like in the end episodes. I'm assuming he brought that man down here to be bait for Bizarro. Because he's like, well, how are we supposed to get him out? It's like, I believe he's using you to get Bizarro out. He's feeding him. But, I mean, rest in peace to that man, because that surely wasn't Lex screaming.
Yeah, no, what a terrible way to go. Everyone was excited when they saw Otis Graves, because Otis is one of Lex's right-hand men in the comics. But R.I.P. Otis, he did not last long at all. I assume now Lex is going to try to manipulate Bizarro into doing something. I know there's supposed to be a big, huge storyline adapted in the season finale, and now it looks like Bizarro Superman will somehow be involved in it. They've really run with this, considering he was one of the primary villains of season 2, and they brought him back, and then have like peppered it all the way out until the end of season 3. It serves the overarching storyline well, but I wonder what kind of role he'll play into it, because that final scene was something else.
And now my man was out here eating rodents to stay alive.
Yeah, and then people
who really fallen from season 2 for him, for a thing. But I mean, yeah, I'm excited for the finale just to see what it is, since they hyped it so much and there's a cliffhanger. And then we're glad we're getting a season 4, because I know Tyler was like, yeah, I'm happy that we got a season 4, because I'd have been sorry for y'all if we didn't.
That means the finale better live up to expectations. It sounds like there might be a cliffhanger. Can't wait to see what they do. Ready for it. I know the show tends to deliver in its finale, so can't wait for it.
But moving to Horseshoe Bay, we are in the aftermath of Nace the movie. We had a wonderful opening scene. I say wonderful because I was like, yes, give us the angst. Nancy not picking up the phone at Icarus Hall, getting to the bottom of the survey bucket, just truly going through it, because her and Ace are not together because Ace decided. And then, like, I think she's screaming, right? And she just goes charging out of the hall.
I did not hear it.
She heard.
Yeah, I thought it was something with the ice cream or whatever she was eating. I was like, what are we doing? We're in the woods now? Maybe it just wasn't in the screener that we had, and it was... Did you guys watch the airing?
No.
Yeah, I didn't either. Maybe they heard it more on TV than we heard it in the screener.
Because I thought she had an idea. I was like, oh, did we have a breakthrough? Did the bottom of the survey...
Yeah. I thought she was going to go to look out for the sludge in the water or something. As completely independent.
It all happened so quickly with the man and the things hanging in the woods and the
Yeah.
stick.
And then when
She's ready though.
yeah, oh, absolutely. But when the heads dropped, I was like, "Oh, this is graphic." And then of course, it was a movie set, and yeah, quite a memorable intro for the
Yeah.
episode.
A lot happened all at once. I enjoyed it because I was like, "What are we doing? What's happening?"
Where do I look?
And then Nancy, being like, "Oh, this is awkward and embarrassing." Well, I thought someone was in danger. Clearly, it's not. What are you doing in my woods, though? I do. It isn't true because they not. I wondered, can they not see Icarus Hall? Because he was like, "Oh, we have a permit," and I was like,
See, I
"Shouldn't
wondered
you still
that too, because
ask?"
even if they have a permit, wouldn't Nancy have had to been like, "Yeah, you can shoot on my property"? But maybe they're just like outside of her property. Who knows how much she owns? Can we see the deed of Icarus Hall?
We did say we don't know how big the woods outside of it are.
No, and I feel like, but then it also gives like, girl, how long had it been since you exited your house? Because I feel like wouldn't we have heard trucks or seen people milling about? But apparently not. But it does reintroduce us to Lacey, who is now from being a podcaster to a director on a horror movie called
Love that
Long
turnaround
Hook.
for her.
The glow up, like the career success. It was wonderful. And her I loved her moment where she was like, in the first movie, the black guy died in like the first 10 minutes. And now my lead is a black woman and we are here, we're taking charge. I was like, give us the representation we deserve, Lacey. Have her kick Long Hook's butt.
Love that. And I was really glad they brought that character back because I really enjoyed her episode in the first place. So I'm glad. I love when a final season pays little tributes to things that came before because we know a show like Nancy will do it well. And yeah, love seeing her back.
I forgot about her. Is that mean to say? I forgot about the podcast episode, but I was pleasantly surprised when I saw her and I remembered because I feel like the expectation for, oh, Nancy's old friend comes and she's filming a movie. I didn't think it was that recent of an old friend. I was like, oh, somebody who knew Nancy in high school. That was just my like prediction. But I was like so pleasantly surprised that it was somebody who's in the same like spooky universe as Nancy came back. And I was like, ooh, love this.
Yeah,
and we have the history of it as well.
Yeah.
I did like that because I know when I read the synopsis, I was like, oh, are we getting Ace's love interest? Because it seemed like it would make sense for it to be an old friend of Nancy's.
You planted that seed, and it was still in my head when she made her arrival. I was like, oh, but then it was quickly like that's not even going to be a thing.
Yeah, because I was like that.
At least for now.
Could you imagine though the messiness? Lacey's in town shooting Long Hook.
The layers.
And her and Ace connect because she has to do some things at the morgue. Like I can't. But I thought, so how do we feel about the case of the week at the movie set where we're like, which first one thing about Nancy, love how Lacey was like, I need a Nancy Drew. And then Nancy was like, I'm a Nancy Drew. And Lacey's like, oh no, I meant I needed one, but I mean, I don't need to have one. Like you don't have to be here. And it's just like, I will be here because I need things to do.
Mm-hmm. Nancy was like dodging those L's. She was like, no, I need a win.
And I thought that was really effective because like she was down on herself. She needed to pick herself back up after feeling that feeling of, I don't even know if rejection is the right word, from not being able to be with Ace just because the curse was still intact and he didn't want to put her in harm anymore. She needed that. She looked like she was post-breakup and she needed that win. And of course then when they said they didn't need a Nancy Drew, it made her feel that kind of rejection again. So I'm glad she stuck to her guns and she got back out there and she dressed like Nancy Drew. She acted like Nancy Drew and she was the Nancy Drew that they needed in the end. Yes, Nancy.
I also think she got into her regular clothes because Lacey was like, so that's a breakup outfit.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
She's like, I'm not taking
she
this.
looked nice.
So did I.
Like, Lacey, that was uncalled for. I didn't even notice what she was wearing. I thought she just had a coat on. What was she wearing?
I think it was sweatpants. I think it was like a green sweatpants
it is nighttime,
situation.
Lacey.
You were woken up by sounds in the middle of the night.
But I thought what I loved about this episode was the partnering of Ryan and Nancy. He was such a dad this episode, and a young dad at that. You could tell.
Second dad is what he said in his voicemail.
Yeah,
I had to rewind that like 3 times. Did he say dad number 2?
Mm-hmm.
I had to rewind it like 3 times to hear what he said.
It was so adorable. He's just like,
it was cute.
He's like, I know you're feeling down, but do you want to let's investigate. Let's do some investigation. And I appreciated that his whole thing was like, I'm gonna let you do what you do as far as like you and Ace, though I feel like you can be able to text him if you don't want to. I will text him for you. But I really appreciated how much they were together this episode, especially like, after Lacey she just accepts that Nancy's going to be around, and Nancy figures out something and she just reaches back for a high five because she knows Ryan's reacting behind her. I love that. It's such a cute little moment, but it spoke to how much they're bonded now.
Mm-hmm.
I love them too. There was one part that I did struggle with, and correct me if I'm not remembering the culmination of the scene and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but she did kind of break down to Ryan later on and be like, what if I can't get over Ace? And he says, you will. Was that like the gist of the conversation? Like he didn't continue, right? Like there wasn't.
Yeah, I feel like he didn't know how to deal with that. So he's like, oh, you will. And that was kind of it.
Yeah,
The
that's
conversation
kind of
just
what
petered out.
Yeah, I didn't really like that response because like I would have liked something a little bit more honest.
Mm.
Like bring in something about how you feel about Lucy or something. Because I was like, telling her you will might be something you think she needs to hear in the moment. But I think Nancy's somebody who respects honesty a little bit more than someone just telling her what she needs to hear. Because I don't think even if she does get over Ace, I think a part of her would always love Ace. And I think that's something that is worth hearing.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Did he bring up Lucy? Well,
I think he did say something.
Did
it was
bring up? I
Bree.
have no idea.
He did say something like, I'm suggesting that he was older now, saying, but I still remember what it was like to feel like that or something. He did put them both on, like, it kind of like, I've been there, I know what it's like, and trust me, you will get over it someday, which definitely added more of a personal touch to it. But I do agree, kind of then pivoted and was like, you know what will help? Movie night. That moved on, which I mean definitely plays into the idea that he's the fun dad of the two, because Carson's definitely helped her with a lot more serious stuff. But I did like that they had a little moment, even if it was brief.
Yeah, I will say though, I enjoy everyone giving Nancy support, but every time we're having a supportive conversation, it seems to be people who have lost somebody, like actual to death. The person was has passed away. They've been laid to rest, and it just feels weird because Ace is very much alive. So you have her dad talking to her about her mom, and him having to live without the person he loves. Ryan, whatever sentence he had about Lucy also passed away. And then you had Lacey talking about her grandmother, who has also passed away. It's like, Ace is alive, though. It's not exactly that equivalent. I know we're grieving like he's gone, but she could text him. Everybody else cannot do that. And so I'm like, will we get a moment where someone is like, girl, I get it, but he's alive and you could text him if you wanted to. Like, you could actually have a relationship with him.
She needs to sit down with George.
Yeah.
Yes.
She tell it like it is.
Because I feel like someone should say it. Like, I get it. She's grieving the potential of this relationship. But at the same time, everybody who's giving you advice has lost someone that you actually cannot communicate with anymore.
I think George would give her the tough love response that she needs. Nick would give her the gentle love response in the same way, but like gentler. So I think those two she needs to turn to at some point.
Please. it needs to happen, but at least she does have people to turn to. Ace had best kind of this episode, but for the most part he was isolated because he was working at the morgue. He did participate in the case. He was doing some behind the scenes things which he
did at the kind of his own heart, right? No one asked him.
I think George asked Ace to hack Bree's phone.
See, they throw so much stuff in dialogue that I forget it after the scene.
There was also did they ask him to figure out what was up with Bree? That might have been out of the kind of he might have taken time out of his looking at cadavers and corpses to figure out what was going on at the house. I can't remember. The plot was plotting, but I was not following some.
Fill in the blanks in the comments for us.
And then I did like the fact he was able to have that conversation with Bess and his phone was urged about his carrying on work. I mean, they did have some nice serious moments. I love their friendship so much, but it did kind of take me out when it quickly descended into Bess audition to showing him her audition for the movie. You're not the pizza guy. And she was like so bad at it. And then she did the Australian accent. Oh, mate, you're not the pizza guy. I was like, really?
He was so sweet though.
He didn't know what to say to the Australian one. She was like, oh, maybe not, moving on. But then, of course, Bess was brilliant in the end, and she had to put an extra little dash of realism in that performance when she got hurt by the hook.
Oh, I
But
knew
like,
that was coming. I knew
so did
it.
I. So did I.
Not
And
dragging that. I was
no,
just
no,
like,
no, no. Yeah, she was in
I
trouble.
know I know they're gonna turn real.
But I mean, that was, I always say sometimes I hate that they play Bess for laughs. Perfect example of them doing it right. That's the kind of humor I like to see from Bess.
And she got to balance too, because we had those humorous moments, but when we were on set and they were dividing up tasks and they had to go interview everybody, Bess was like, most people I talked to seemed fine, but there was this guy, and so they went to go talk to him about the previous director on Long Cook and his behavior on set, which is true to life for some sets. Unfortunately, there are some directors who should not be working right now, but was interesting to see Bree's part in this from back in like 20 years, 30 years ago. How long ago was it? It was a while
20 or
ago.
30. It was 93.
30, yep.
30.
Have to get real.
30 years ago, when like just to see, how intense that set was, and to the point where she let this man die in the bathtub when it was just supposed to be a prank because she hated him so much. I am intrigued by why exactly people's memories of terrible things they've done have been erased and replaced with good memories, and they get everything back once they drink the sludge in the water. As first of all, who erased the memories and why? Second of all, why does the sludge care to remind them of what they actually did?
I feel like so we learned that there's a thing called the Black Room. We don't know what that is. So I assume that's what was responsible for taking the memories from people and replacing them with happy ones. But does that come at a cost? We don't know. But I do feel like that whatever this sludge is, whatever this danger is, this is why I find it so interesting. It might be the most interesting kind of mystery they've tackled so far, is that it seems like it's unearthing the town's deeply buried secrets. Everyone's talking about how the supernatural is kind of coming into the conversation more often because everyone kind of just like nod and winked at the fact that they were just superstitious ceremonies, whereas now everyone's starting to accept that the supernatural is all around us. The police chief, who I'm sure we'll drag in a few moments, is terrified of the supernatural, even though she's accepted that it exists. Everyone's secrets are starting to come out. I don't know what the sludge is, but it sounds like it's trying to pull the dark history of Horseshoe Bay out into the light. And obviously, it'll be up to the Drew crew to either help it do that or stop it from doing it before someone gets hurt. And the fact we're 4 episodes in and don't know much about it, that's a good mystery to me. The pacing's been very well on that front, and I can't wait to see where it goes next.
Yeah, I don't know. The water's stressing me out because anytime somebody's drinking anything, I'm like, where did you get like when they handed Lacey a cup of coffee at the Claw after she survived her stabbing? What happened? She ran into a window. She was pushed into a window. Regardless, when they handed her that cup of coffee, I was like, what did you make that coffee with? I'm like, I'm scared about anybody drinking water in this town. Is it just the water at the Claw? Is it all water? I don't know. I'm stressed about the water.
It's none of the water in Horseshoe Bay is safe at this point. Like,
it's terrifying.
It's very terrifying. George and Nick have been buying water bottles, which I'm not
like,
sure.
What if you're taking a shower and you open your mouth and you ingest? I'm scared. I'm not even there, and it's fictional.
Real questions, though.
It is because like they had that big the assistant director was talking about how they had this big jug of tap water because the other assistants are really about being green, and they were just checking that. They were just drinking. I think he told them to stop drinking, and once he realized that we were getting black veins on our neck and something was weird. It's also terrifying because Lacey had nothing to do with what was happening on the original Long Cook. Might not have even been alive. And she is still having to take on what happened with that director because her people had been affected by the sludge and were ready to kill her in Icarus Hall, which, by the way, I don't understand how Nancy's living there by herself because that place is spooky. It's not a corner in it.
It's so scary. I'm like, why did we not renovate? Let's throw our grief into DIYs. Log into Pinterest, Nancy.
Put some wallpaper up.
Paint a wall. Did we clean when we moved in? I don't know. It's really spooky still to me. And
take the big dungeon doors down. We don't need those.
Oh my god! Right? Install some cameras. I don't know. Like, how has Carson not done that?
I don't know, because the other thing, this is the same hall, right, where people got slaughtered.
Yep.
And
Yep.
was that season 2 when they with Tom's episode?
Yep.
And like Nancy,
Yep.
were cool because you actually literally do have a dungeon in the basement. Like that's like right there, and there was blood there. So
If we had a bigger time, John, I'm not gonna get into time, but we could have returned to Nancy and Icarus Hall with full renovation. New drapes, some colorful rugs, something to brighten the place up.
All we've
Like,
got
how
is the
has Bess
plastic
not
sign.
jumped in there and been like, we're flipping this place? Why hasn't
Mhm.
Bess moved in? Where's Bess living? Do we know?
No,
probably at the historical society because isn't it an actual house?
I guess that makes sense.
I don't know, but I
I
feel
wouldn't
like
want to stay there either.
Nancy needs a
No.
roommate.
She does. Bess could be the roommate because you know what? They're both staying at places with magical objects, and they both seem to be fine about it.
Let's, strength in numbers. Buddy system.
Yes, I mean they're gonna need it too with the sheriff. To go back to the sheriff, because she's very intense about like we're not doing this here. It's like avoiding the fact that there's supernatural things here is not going to make the supernatural things go away. They're here
I
to
love
stay.
that scene for Bess where she stood her ground.
Yes, she's very much like, you need to know that knowledge is power. What do you mean you don't want to do things? She's like, well, I'm not going to let it affect the town. It's like, it's already affecting the town. Did we not get the binder? The big Horseshoe Bay Bible, letting you know all the weird things that happened in town. You arriving doesn't change the fact that ghosts walk around here daily.
This is she's clearly very by the book and wants to like fight fire with water, and that's not how it works in Horseshoe Bay. If there's something supernatural happening, you need to stop it with a supernatural cure. And Bess is obviously the key to that. I did say I wanted to see more of her getting to be a witch, and I think we will get to see that as the season progresses, which is good. Could she get into trouble with the law for practicing magic when it's the only way to stop dangerous things from happening? That's a good hook. I can't wait to see that.
And the stomach pump broke.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, right. We were laughing the other day about how it was always their answer, but like they don't have it anymore.
But that gets us, we're gonna get Tristan, I feel like, next episode, because they
Mhm.
need him to, they mentioned him.
They did, and I
Not
forgot
to bring the vibe down for the rest of the, the true crew out there.
But they know that we're fine with Tristan. It is going to be interesting, though, to see, how he's going to interact with everybody. If he is in the next episode, I don't see why he wouldn't be, because this seemed like the Nancy's going to choose to move on and move forward episode. So that feels like Tristan's going to be knocking at, well, she's going to be knocking at Tristan's door. They'd be like, I broke the stomach pump, but I also need something else. I think they're going to be cute as an interim situation.
Yeah.
I think Nancy needs that just to get her mind off of everything. Isn't that one of Dua Lipa's rules?
Yes, and her new rules.
Just gonna say.
But to go back to the way you saw the season, Reed, the first quarter was obviously all about the storyline. I agree. I feel like these next 3 episodes is for Nancy would be the grief, the distraction, and then the acceptance. And then we'll move into the next chapter, which will be crossing paths with this again. If the distraction is our next chapter, I do feel like that'll be Tristan and Nancy will end up on a very like maybe Nancy and Ace like mission together, and then feelings will be felt, conversations will be had, and then we'll see where that takes them. And I agree, we're early in the season, we know how it's going to end. Let's have a little fun while we're here, because watching Nancy and Ace be miserable isn't fun. We don't want that. So if we have to distract them for a little while, distract them, but we know they'll find their way back to each other at the end. So enjoy Tristan while he's here. Enjoy whatever it is Nancy and him get up to, whatever mysteries they're on, however the glasses factor into it. I'm all for it, because we don't have many episodes left. Live in the moment.
I know. Just enjoy it. And it's really, I think that relationship's going to be enjoyable. They're cute. Like, I don't think obviously there are going to be people who would prefer to see Ace and Nancy grow, which I get that because it is the final season. But I feel like we should just accept that Tristan is here. But don't take pleasure in his near-death experience, because he is going to have that "you're not going to die in the woods" moment, which I'm so intrigued to find out what it is that he's suffering from in these woods whenever we get to it.
And perhaps this relationship or whatever it becomes with Tristan will circle back to the conversation with Ryan that I have a slight issue with, where maybe she's dating Tristan and she realizes, oh, I'm not going to get over Ace.
Mhm.
So maybe that's where that comes in.
Mhm.
Maybe. But there is something that I want to talk about off pod that I just had a thought about. That'll stay between the three of us.
Love that.
Can't wait.
I think so. What else with this? We
George
did cover
and
the
Nick.
mystery. Yes, thank you. The Fanson. The Fanson was. It got better towards the end, but that arguing in the beginning, because they literally their lives are so intertwined that they have friction now because he's like, George, I don't want to do this, and she's like, you changed. She's like, it's been one episode. He has not changed. He just doesn't want you tracking a woman's phone.
Yeah, and I struggled with them something serious. This was back to the old. We didn't enjoy watching them in this back half of the season 3 because they were always arguing about silly things, and it was like they weren't addressing the main problems. This felt exactly the same as that. I love seeing them on screen paired together. The second half of this episode was a delight, but the first half was not. I feel like Nick was downplaying how smart and intuitive he is just to force the storyline, because I do think he would have. Yes, he has morals. He doesn't like hacking people's phones, but if he was worried about someone, he absolutely would have suggested Ace do that. Whereas all of a sudden, you're like, you asked Ace to do what? That's a crime. That's something you would never do. And I'm like, actually, it is. You've done it all the time. And then George, we know George can get angry, and they've played on that for laughs or whatever. And they kind of really, really doubled down on that this time. So I feel like they had them both, like they have like caricatures of themselves just to force the conflict so they could have that conversation and then realize, actually, we like spending time together. And I'm like, if they wanted space, could we not just have separated them for a few episodes instead of having them on screen arguing again? Because that was the whole problem with them in the first place.
Remind me, where did they land? Like,
They're best friends now.
Oh.
She was like, you're my best friend. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, okay.
And they were like, we don't need space anymore.
I actually felt like George could have been on her own for this episode. Because she really was the driving force of their part of figuring out what happened. I feel like Nick kind of just got dragged along, and then he became more of an important figure in it once we got to Bree and we started having a conversation with her. And it just seemed to be a way to fuel George once again, telling him he needs to lead the council.
Yeah.
And I feel like if he's not on board about that, though, I think we should stop pushing it. Because he doesn't seem like he's all the, like, I think he doesn't mind having a seat at the table, but I just feel like he doesn't want to lead right now, which is fine. He's like, what, 22? He doesn't have to lead the entire Horseshoe Bay Council. I think having a seat is fine if that's all he wants.
I think we need, if that's going to be the game plan, I think we need at least one more episode where he comes to that decision himself. Or something happens, or he realizes like, oh, this is something that they need and I want, and that will better my life trajectory. I just don't want him to, like you said, I don't want him to be pushed into it because of convenience and because of George's convictions.
Especially because she was the one, what did she have a line about how she said she was the one who wanted to do something about the town, but he has the bigger presence. It's like, well, girl, you could sit on the council then. Like, do you have to run or something? Like, or I don't know what she has to do here. I mean, that obviously in real life, you have to run for a council seat. But apparently, Nick can just show up here.
In this moment, I'm realizing like the growth of these 5 characters and like how much they've like fanned out. Like, obviously, Nancy's still doing her investigative thing. Nick is primed to be a figurehead in this government. We got Bess in the historical society. George knows the law now, and Ace is in the morgue. They've got their feet planted in all corners of where they need them in this town. That's incredible from where they were in season 1.
Especially
struggling to run a diner together.
And it all took place in less than a year. Growth.
Michael, we can't talk about time.
But I mean, there really is though, because like the Claw might not be the place to be during like the morning or lunch hours, so they do have some clientele, but nighttime they are booked and they are busy. And I still know, like, because George just ran out of the restaurant and she's like, we have to figure out what's happening with Bree, and Nick is like, closing folders, I think is what he was doing. And I was like, so we can let the staff know that both bosses are out of the building? Or are they on their own? We sink and swimming by ourselves?
I'd wonder if they will address that, because like both of them now have full-time commitments elsewhere, and yet when they agreed that they'd run it together, they agreed that that would be a full-time commitment. So how are they out here juggling all of this at once? Like, I want the time they have. How do they manage that?
Yeah, perhaps they hired a new manager off screen and it's just not important to the plot.
Yeah, who knows?
I'd see that. I would want to see her though. Just like I want to see
give
the
it a
bagel
sentence.
shop.
Yeah.
You know, we need to see the manager at the claw, and we need to see the bagel shop before the series finale. I hope so. I mean, I'm really manifesting that. I can't take it to the mall because everything's finished and edited and just sitting to be aired. So, is there anything to take to the mall before we end the episode?
I can't think of anything.
No. Okay,
No.
so, well, I guess mall, take PTO. We have nothing for you.
Yeah. It's been a stressful week. You've earned a week off.
I mean, the mall's been slacking anyway, so.
Oh, but no. Well, we're on your side. I don't want any bad news about anything else. Reed is just saying that lovingly because he wants you to flourish in the job.
Facts are facts.
Stop it.
Reed's like, I said what I said. No,
I mean, we could ask the mall. We won't get into the nitty gritty, but like, I've been thinking about this idea since we talked about it. I would like for the mall to somehow align Kennedy McMahon, Busy Tulloch, and Kerry Russell's schedules for them to be in a movie together. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to elaborate for the audience, but the three of us know what that means. And our vision is so crystal clear and brilliant that I feel like everybody listening to this podcast would be like, we need that. So, mole, even if we're not involved, I think the three of them need to be in something together. There's the mole's orders.
Yeah, make it happen.
Make it happen. Okay, well, that's it for this week's episode. We're the CW Spiral. I'm Sabrina.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Reed.
Bye, y'all.